Hi, this is Howard Cooper, and before we jump into this podcast interview, I just wanted to share that I've been lucky enough over the last couple of years to have interviewed a bunch of other leading therapists and agents of change, really exploring their take on everything rapid change related. What you're about to see was recorded a little while ago, but it still holds tremendous value if you're someone that wants to learn about how to help people make quick behavioural shifts. So I hope you enjoy, and to make sure you don't miss any of the new releases, then take action and click that subscribe button, and then you'll be kept in the loop when any new episodes come out. Welcome to the Rapid Change Matters podcast. My name is Howard Cooper, and for over 14 years now, I've been fascinated with helping people to create personal change quickly. But I still come across many who believe that lasting personal change has to take a long time, consisting of reliving traumas or deep psychological analysis, or simply that flawed notion that understanding why you have a problem will somehow make it go away. I'm on a mission to get people who work therapeutically with others to shift their thinking and realise that these beliefs are not written in stone. Rapid change can happen. So, to help you open up to what's possible, I'm interviewing top therapists and agents of change who are out there getting real results with real people really quickly. Before we get to the interview, I just wanted to let you know that I've written a quick-to-read, downloadable PDF on 5 strategies to amplify your client's response, with some great tips on getting your therapeutic suggestions to really sizzle. You can download this for free from rapidchange.works, where you can also find all the information about this episode and episodes still to come. Now, over to the interview. Today, we welcome to the podcast someone who I suspect could challenge many ideas that people have about what constitutes good coaching and therapy. Because whilst he's an NLP trainer and psychologist, he's also one of the foremost trainers and practitioners of provocative coaching and therapy. One of his books on provocative work is subtitled Making Things Better by Making Them Worse. So enormously excited to be able to chat today with Jaap Hollander. Welcome, Jaap.
Thank you very much. A wonderful introduction. I wish more people were saying that about me.
Well, I'm sure they are. And you can pay me later. It's fine.
All right, it's okay.
So look, jumping straight in, I would love you to tell me a little bit about yourself, the work you do and how you got started.
Yes, I got started as a clinical psychologist in psychiatry. Mm-hmm. And, basically, I wasn't very happy with the results we were getting. So I thought in psychiatry we need stronger methods. And so I got into hypnosis as a potentially more effective method to help psychiatric patients. And from there on, I got into NLP, which is basically, of course, as you know, hypnosis without trance induction. Mm-hmm. My institute in the Netherlands was the first institute to introduce NLP. And so we did very well with that for for decades, basically. And then along the way, I got into contact with Frank Fairley, the founder and father of provocative therapy. I was totally flabbergasted, to see and hear Fairley's work. I mean, at that time, it was so opposite to everything you knew in psychotherapy. I was also a cognitive behavior therapist at the time. It was so totally different from that I couldn't even really understand what was happening. Well, that seems much clearer now, but at the time, if you get confronted with something that's so totally different from your own mindset, sometimes you can't even really understand what's going on. But I did see that it was very effective. So I studied with Fairley basically 25 years. Mm-hmm. and started also teaching provocative coaching and provocative change work, writing about it. So that's how I got in touch with you.
To someone who's never come across provocative therapy or a provocative approach, how would you describe it? What is it?
Provocative coaching is helping somebody change by challenging them in a humorous and loving way.
Because I've seen demonstrations, or I've seen and heard people talk about provocative therapy, and it's interesting that you talk about challenging them with humor and in a loving way. Because I suspect, am I right in saying that without those two key components, it can just seem almost aggressive or overly confrontational?
Yes, exactly. We always say for good provocative, it can still work though, even though it's confrontational and, sort of sarcastic. But from a therapeutic point of view, it's better to keep the three balls in the air. So have the confrontation, have the challenge, have the provocation, but also the love, which makes it, easier to digest the content, and the humor, which sort of says, well, don't take it too seriously.
Yeah.
So that's the ideal cocktail, so to speak.
And are there certain issues or certain types of people that you wouldn't choose to work provocatively with, because you think, well, I've got to treat them with kid gloves, that their issue is too serious?
Yeah, well, so I'm working together in this in the Netherlands with my good colleague and old friend Jeffrey Wijnberg, and my wife and colleague Anneke Meijer. And so between us, we have treated lots of different people and lots of different problems with provocative therapy. In psychiatry, hospitalized psychiatric patients have responded well, but also in management, well-functioning managers basically with problems. I just a few days ago, I saw a lady who had a fear of driving her car. And basically, in one provocative session, she was driving again. She wasn't enjoying it much, but she was driving again. And so the only exception where we never do use the provocative approach is on recent trauma. So after a while, you could use provocative coaching on how people are dealing with the trauma, but the trauma itself, we never approach that provocatively, especially not when it's recent.
Is there a danger that you can push people too far? The book, and we talked about the subtitle being, making things, things better by making them worse. Is there an argument to say that sometimes you could make things worse by making them worse?
Well, not in my experience. So the presupposition in provocative therapy and provocative coaching is that people are much more resilient than you think they are.
Yeah.
So there's this whole dynamic also where when you challenge somebody in this way, you are giving the meta message that they are strong and they can, handle that. If you are very careful with somebody, on the other hand, you're giving the meta message that they're sort of fragile and weak, and you have to, you're not so sure that they can handle any sort of realistic feedback.
So, because that idea of being quite soft and empathic seems like a very traditional and typical approach that many therapists take. And are we saying that there is a danger that actually, if we do that, what we're saying to them is actually, I need to treat you in that way?
Yes, precisely. And also, by the way, Frank Fairley started off as a Rogerian, empathic, client-centered, client-focused therapist. Mm-hmm. He was actually taught by Rogers himself. And so there's still a basis of, empathy in provocative therapy, but it's more in the relationship than in the content.
Well, because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about and interest me is the nature of how we would define rapport within the therapeutic context. Whether you think rapport is important to facilitate change, and actually how a provocative stance and the traditional view of rapport kind of go hand in hand, or do they fit?
Yes, they do. Well, as an NLP trainer, I'm really very conscious of, rapport variables like matching and, your basic attitude. But in provocative, it works a little bit differently. It's like, first of all, you make rapport non-verbally by, to some extent, matching the person, but also, for instance, by, in a social manner, touching them, sort of showing non-verbally that you accept them and that you, see their, beautiful side. But at the same time, if you challenge them with, provocative statements on who they are, you're very often touching something that they've thought themselves, but hardly even dare to think themselves. Mm-hmm. And that also gives a certain deep level of rapport. Well, at least it can do that. So finally, here's a person who knows my, darkest sides, my biggest fears, etc.
Yeah, which I suppose if someone appears to have great insight, it helps with a deeper connection.
Yeah, and also the provocative therapist is using so much of his own material, so much of his own impulses in his own life story, in his own responses, that it's also a really personal type of therapy where, as normally, therapist is limited by all kinds of professional rules, and there's a whole bunch of things that come up in his mind that he will never say because it's not professional. Mm-hmm. The provocative therapist tends to throw that all out, so he's more visible as a person for the client.
It's so can you give me some kind of real examples of a way in which you might help someone? You talked about a lady who was terrified of driving or engaged in the process of not going out and driving.
Yes.
How would you go about working with someone like that provocatively?
Yeah, it was very funny because so this person, she's in her 40s. She has some children, and she has a good car that she shares with the family, basically. Mm-hmm. And she, as you can often see, she had an accident, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and she hadn't driven since. She was afraid of driving, and she should. She wanted to drive again. She also, on a practical level, she needed to take the children to certain places and do certain shopping and stuff. Mm-hmm. So she had been in psychotherapy for a long time, and the psychotherapist sent her to me to, deal with the driving issue. And, basically I was saying to her, this fear is totally adequate because the Dutch traffic, apart maybe from Amman in Jordan, the Dutch traffic here in our city of Nijmegen is one of the dangerous types of traffic in the world. At least 75% of the people who drive are drunk, either drunk or stoned or both, So you see them swerving on the road, So we have to discuss, if you start driving here again, always start with the Indian saying, Hoka hey, it's a good day to die. And then you step in the car, but make sure you said goodbye to everyone. Take your children apart, tell them, Mommy really loves you, no matter what happened. Always remember, Mommy loves you. And your husband too. Maybe you call your parents, some of your best friends, before you get into the car. And then it's very important to learn, drive around the corpses. Because, of course, in the traffic, there'll be corpses everywhere. And it's really, really impolite to sort of drive straight over the corpse. You have to sort of swerve around the corpse. And I was just going on like this for a while. And so also I discussed with her before, that was not really that provocative, but saying, well, by driving again in this sort of murderous Nijmegen traffic, you will give a good example to your children. You say, well, you can develop a phobia, and then you can get over it. So they will get that message. If they ever develop any big fears, they will have this example of their mother who overcame that. And I think that's very important. So I sort of went through with her pretty detailed how she would drive, the kinds of other cars she would hit and how to deal with that. And, like I said, the corpses, how to take the blood of the car and stuff like that. And, what kind of detergents to use. And then she left, and next time she came back, she had been driving. So I was talking to her about, but she wasn't totally conscious of why, but she was conscious about the example for the children aspect of it. Mm-hmm. So that was I'm not saying this is always going to work, because I was really sort of surprised that she had done it. But so that was very nice.
That's I love hearing about that kind of stuff, and the approach that you take, because it's just so different to how I think many people would, talk to someone who was anxious about, driving.
Yeah, and we were laughing a lot during this first conversation. So there you have also some sort of deep reconditioning where you're thinking about your fear and you're laughing at the same time. I'm convinced something neurological happens then.
Yeah. Well, this is a little bit like, I've had people that come and see me and they say, I'm terrified of flying, but if you tell me that every flight from now on will be okay, I'll be fine. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that doesn't seem like a useful thing, because I don't know if every flight from now on is going to be all right.
No. Well, that was something that she was talking about, how she had sort of accepted risk and accepted danger and, started seeing danger and risk as part of life.
I know you've talked in the past about things like an acceptance response or a resistance response, and what are those, and what are the differences, and why are both okay?
Yes, well, so basically we were always going for the resistance response. So in this case, it was very simple. I would, overdo it so much with the danger of driving that she would have a resistance response, saying or thinking or feeling, well, it can't be that dangerous. A business person who was about 50 or in his 50s, and he had met a woman, he was very happy with their relationship, except that he was very jealous. Mm-hmm. And so they would be in a bar or restaurant, and I think he was talking about a restaurant, and she would be sort of looking at other men, and he just couldn't take it. And then, of course, he'd get very angry and frustrated, and the whole atmosphere went down the drain in that restaurant, and they leave early and have a relationship, have fights, relationship problems. So his girlfriend knew about me and basically sent him to me to cure him of his jealousy. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, this is the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. There's this woman, she's basically, riding up and down the legs of the table. And then, I wouldn't really, dare, of course, to call her a whore, but, and then, you have to deal with this woman, and then you are jealous, perfectly normal. And then you are the one who has to change. This is totally ridiculous. He said, well, she's not that bad. She's a school teacher. She's actually the head of a school. I said, my God, she's the head of a school. Do the parents know that? Do the parents know what kind of person is leading this school? And he said, no. She's not that bad. So basically, by keeping it up like this for a while, all the time, he was resisting that, and that resistant response was, no, she's not as bad as that. And the next time I saw him, this is also one of those really rapid cases, he came in and he said, well, I'm not jealous anymore. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, you were saying this all the time about my girlfriend, how terrible she was and promiscuous and amoral and crazy. And all the time I was saying, no, she's not as bad as that. And that's the whole, I carried that with me, the whole thing. No, she's great. I like her. I love her. If this is the biggest problem, then it's no problem. And so that was a very good example of a resistance response. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, people will have an acceptance response. You will go, well, you have this problem in your work, in your career, but it's totally logical because you are absolutely unsuited for the kind of work you're trying to do. And then sometimes people will say, yes, you're right, I am. I'll have to go and do something else. So there you are trying to basically provoke them into a resistance response, but but they accept your crazy suggestion. Mm-hmm. Which is good, because if you can accept things as they are, you're also cured, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it
doesn't matter to us which one you do.
So, I've seen various demos of strictly sort of provocative work in action, mm-hmm. And heard various demos where Frank Farrelly is in action, mm-hmm. And it strikes me that some people go into what I would call sort of a state of confusion.
Yes, a confusion trance.
Yeah,
a therapist would say.
Is that for you? If you hit a confusion trance, is that a sign that things are going in the right direction, or what does that let you know?
Yes, exactly as you say, things are going in the right direction, and from this confusion trance, new mindsets, new habits, new ideas, new feelings, new emotional sets may develop. In the 70s or the 80s, there were even theories that all the good moments in therapy are trance moments. Mm-hmm. And there was somebody who could really make a pretty strong case for that. In provocative, if you notice somebody's in a trance state, you can also switch from provocative to congruent work and do some good suggestions while they're in a trance anyway.
So I was going to ask you how much you use a provocative framework as a standalone approach, or how much you kind of integrate other skills and tools around it.
Yes, it is possible to use it as a standalone approach, but you can also combine it with all kinds of other methods where you do a bit of provocative work, you hit an internal conflict, you do some conflict negotiation from NLP, or somebody will come up with a certain symbol, you can do some symbol work, or even a little bit of hypnosis, it all. And also, when you're doing the other methods, basically, primarily, it's often very useful to make a few provocative jokes to sort of, loosen things up a little and, bring some humor into it. And at the same time, of course, seeing how they respond to that. And if they respond to that very well, you might develop this further into a full-blown provocative session.
Yeah. I really like that, and I think it aligns very nicely with some of the stuff that I've seen in my own practice, which is I think one of the reasons people get a little bit stuck is they're used to taking their problems a little too seriously, and they're in their problem trance. So look, I mean, historically, as we've spoken about before, I think there are some traditional views of therapy, which is that lasting change, therapeutic results, need to take a long time. There's got to be deep analysis, self-reflection involved. You've got to have people reliving past traumas to make them better, and understanding why you've got a problem before you can have relief. Are those things that you still come across being pervading sort of general consciousness around therapy? And where do you think they've come from?
Yes, well, I absolutely see those mindsets in lots of coaching work even. So I think basically, Freudian psychoanalysis has been a big imprint for the therapeutic culture.
Yeah.
Freud was seeing people for years, 5 days a week. So that has been sort of, has landed in our therapeutic consciousness as a basic model of how people change. And you still see a lot of that, right? Even though, of course, most therapies are much, much, much briefer than that. It's still this whole idea that A, it takes a long time, and B, once you have the insight, the change will follow automatically. And which sometimes isn't the case. Well, actually, pretty often it isn't the case. And then a reaction to that was the Rogerian client-centered therapy, where you basically would put the client in an environment of, warm, empathic acceptance. One of the terms of that era was unconditional positive regards. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, I will view you as a beautiful, worthwhile person. And then the idea was, once if you could, keep people in that atmosphere long enough, they would automatically feel so safe that they would change by themselves. So you still see those two mindsets and mixtures of them in a lot of therapy, in a lot of coaching. And then there was the several responses to that again, because people thought it wasn't very effective, and very often it wasn't. So there you get NLP, solution focused. Hypnosis came back. Hypnosis every 70 or 40 years. There's a new wave of hypnosis therapy. And provocative therapy was also one response again to this this Rogerian approach. So that came about when Frank Fairley was working as a Rogerian client-centered therapist. And he had this one patient in psychiatry who was about to leave the hospital. And he said, well, Frank, I don't know if I'm going to make it outside. It seems pretty difficult. And suddenly Frank was saying, well, I'm pretty sure you're not going to make it outside. And so this patient looked at him and said, well, Frank, you're not supposed to say that. So here you see, clients have a pretty good idea of where the boundaries of their therapists are. So Frank, from his sort of humorous Irish background, continued a little bit with him about, no, I shouldn't say that, but now that I've said it anyway, there's a few other things I can say. And so he started sort of basically joking with the patient, and then he met this patient again in the streets in Madison, I think it was, doing fine. And the patient was saying, well, Frank, when you said, I couldn't make it, I thought, well, we'll see about that. And here I am. So then Frank thought, oh, well, this is a very, very quick change compared to the Rogerian approach that I usually do. And I had exactly the same experience about 2 years ago when there was an institution in Rotterdam that works completely provocatively with young people who are addicted, have problems with the law, sometimes are, not that intelligent, and sometimes all three of those problems. And I was visiting this, so I was in the board of, how do you call it in English, the oversight board in that institution. So I visited one of the locations, and I run into this youngster, with tattoos and, all the, trimmings of a street youth. And so I was introducing myself, and he said to me, "Are you the Jaap Hollander?" I said, "Yeah, well," for a moment. I thought, well, I don't know. What do you mean? I said, no. Are you the Jaap Hollander from the book? I said, yes, sure. He said, well, that book is fantastic. I said, okay, well, have you read it? Because he didn't really even strike me as a person who would read a lot of books. I mean, it's my, my presuppositions, of course. No, he read it several times, and he was in this institution. He was doing very well. But what I found very interesting, how he explained that. He said, I have been in therapy and counseling and all kinds of, treatments ever since I was 12. And I think he was about, 25 or something at the time. Mm-hmm. And I always had this idea, I am nothing and I can do nothing. I'm worthless. And of course, everybody was saying, well, no, you're not worthless. You're great. We love you. You're wonderful. Think about yourself, positively, etc., etc. And he said, I always thought these people are crazy. They don't understand the first thing about me. So then I came here in this place, and of course I started telling them again, I'm worthless. I can do nothing. I am nothing. But the first thing they were saying, well, you don't have to tell us that. We could see that the moment you walked in the door. I was telling my colleague actually, well, if I've ever seen a worthless person come in, it's this one. and he said, well, wait a minute. So he was really had a really aggressive, resistant response. He was saying, well, who the fuck are you to determine that? I'm going to determine that myself. I said, yeah, well, some people can determine that for themselves. Some people can't. And you strike us as a person who's totally powerless over these processes. And he's going, well, we'll see about that. And he said, in hindsight, he was saying, that was the moment it turned around for me. That was the moment I thought, no, I'm in control of my life. I can make changes. Talk about rapid change. That was a rapid change in 5 minutes.
Yeah. I love hearing these tales and these stories of how people have reacted to this kind of stuff. Have you been met with resistance by other, clinicians and therapists when they hear about this kind of approach?
Yes, certainly. It's absolutely not as bad as it was when we first started. So the whole idea of provocative coaching, provocative therapy, certainly in the Netherlands it's known now. So I've written several books about it in Dutch. My colleague Jeffrey Wijnberg has written a whole stack about books about it, maybe 20 or 25. So people pretty much know what it is, but it does go against some traditional rules in therapy and coaching. Well, if only people say, well, you ask a lot of closed questions. And I said, yeah, well, I'm provocative, that's okay. Or they go, well, you talk a lot. Shouldn't the client talk more? So well, we say, well, if the client wants to say something, he has to fight for his term. That's good for him. So it's like, and you use a lot of, our own processes, our own ideas, our own intuitions, our own imagery coming up in the therapy, which, from a Freudian point of view, of course, that's counter-transference. And Freudians would also say that humor is a defense mechanism against the real underlying emotions. So there's all kinds of, ideas like that. But it doesn't bother us much, really, in the sense that we don't believe that everybody should be a provocative therapist. I mean, if an institution, say, they have 20 therapists or 20 coaches, and there's one or two provocative therapists, that works just fine, because then all the traditional coaches can send their difficult, resistant clients to the provocative coach, who will probably be very happy to work with them.
Yeah.
Have, them having a good resistance response.
Yeah. So, just going back a second, there's a number of times that on the conversation we've talked about coaching and therapy. What's the difference between coaching and therapy as you see it?
None. So, and I know this goes really a lot against the grain of the present ideas about what is coaching, what is therapy. I think basically, a lot of these distinctions are either an insult for therapy or an insult for coaching. So coaches will say, well, therapy is totally focused on the past and we are focused on the present and the future. But if you look at some therapies, even like cognitive behavior therapy is very much focused on the future, the present and future. So that's not true. But also the other side, therapists will say, well, we do deep emotional change and coaches do superficial behavior changes. That's not true either. There's some coaching methods, even things like co-counseling and stuff, who really go for really deep emotional changes. So I think a distinction is sometimes useful, but also the whole thing about work-related problems and personal problems. There's not that much of a distinction, I don't think. People will respond to their boss a little bit like they would respond to their father or their mother. It's a very personal thing, and yet it's work-related. And on the other hand, in your personal life, it's very important what kind of work you do, if you can express your passion in your work and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So the long answer is, I don't see much difference. I get more resistance on this point of view than on any, content things in provocative.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some things I don't understand about that difference.
So if people wanted to get good at change work or working rapidly with people, what resources, books, trainings, things would you recommend for them?
Especially provocative or anything
that comes to mind, just using hindsight as well and experience, either stuff that has been of benefit to you, or looking back you would say, actually, I would recommend now doing X, Y, and Z.
Yes, well, I always say I have 4 cards up my sleeve. One of them is NLP, which is my basic sort of, fallback method. The second one is provocative, which I, use a lot, often in combination, or the third one is hypnosis. And the fourth one is actually something developed in the UK by James Lawley and Penny Tompkins called symbolic modeling. I call it symbol work. Somebody has uses a spontaneous image or metaphor, you can develop that. And so basically somebody comes in and I wait which method sort of comes to me to work with that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very important to use your intuitions in that. So now maybe there's even a fifth one, which is straightforward advice. This is also absolutely not done, even in NLP. And mm-hmm. I tend to use that. And so if somebody's open for it, what you should do is this and this and this, and I'll explain it to you.
Nice.
So that works very well.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. If people want to hear more about the work you do or experience firsthand a training or being involved with the work that you do, how should they get in touch with you?
Yes, well, I have a website called Provocative Coaching and Therapy.com. I'm on Facebook in English. Mm-hmm. I'm on Facebook, Jaap Hollander.
Well, I will be uploading all of the contact details that you sent me on the up onto the information guide with in iTunes, so that they'll be able to click through as well. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon in terms of helping people facilitate rapid change that actually, when you think about rapid change, would be important to put out there or talk about?
The whole issue of rapid change has to do with how do problems develop. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've once heard, I think it was a hypnotherapist say, and which always, stuck in my mind, was that problems can develop very quickly. And problems can develop without you having any insight. So if problems can develop that way quickly and without understanding, why wouldn't solutions and changes and the solution of that problem, why couldn't that happen in the same way? Why couldn't that happen, quickly and without any insight? Mm-hmm. And that was always somehow a convincing argument for me.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today. And I'm really hoping that people listening, it will spark lots of ideas and thoughts about stepping outside what we think is possible or what constitutes a therapeutic approach, so that people can explore deeper, further, harder, faster, and so on.
All right. Well, thank you very much for interviewing me, Howard. I enjoyed talking to you, and I think you have a wonderful, fresh approach to change, and I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, why not share it with anyone you think might be interested? And even head over to iTunes to give us a glowing review. You'll find more about what's coming up on our Facebook page, facebook.com/rapidchangeworks. And of course, you'll find all the links related to this episode, plus those free 5 steps to getting your suggestions to sizzle over at rapidchange.works.